Welcome to session 12. Tuba Reolfi is actually the real name of the person I've been calling Steven Spielberg. Isn't she wonderful and awesome, making all these videos for us? We're very grateful. Carlene and I are here as discussants and participants and key informants in this information tracking and disclosure. Today what I want to talk about is something that's pissing me off today. This is in real life. That's how I often conduct my classrooms. What is pissing me off today? And that's what I talk about. So today what I'm pissed off about is technology. Apparently the Service Canada office downtown here in Prince George, our little town of about 72,000 people, remains closed. The Government Services Office remains closed. So why is that a social work issue? How does that relate to social work with victims of abuse? Let me tell you, funny you should ask. Technology has become the tail that is sometimes wagging the dog in social work. I'm going to back up and tell you a story. Students tell me they like my little story, so here's a little story. I left home very early and I was out there waitressing and doing clerk jobs and minimum wage, part-time kind of labor. I often had 2 or 3 jobs on the go. At one point, I went to the Canada Employment Office. We called it the POGI office at the time. I'm not even sure how come it got to be called POGI office. Do you still use that word? POGI?
No.
What do you call unemployment insurance?
EI.
EI. EI, employment insurance. So right, it got flipped, the wording. Remember George Orwell. It used to be, POGI had a tone to it, right? But now it's employment insurance. It's kind of more allegedly positive. So I went to the EI office, and there was a guy there named Wes. Wes would talk to me about what job I had, what did I want, and so on. You also would go into, when you came into the entrance of this place, there were little cards with jobs that were advertised, and you would pull 1 or 2 or 3 cards and wait for your turn to go talk to Wes, and Wes would say, oh, this job is here and that job is there, and so on. And then you could go for the job. You would have had a human interaction between you and Wes. This is in Northern Ontario, very long ago. Now what you do is you look on the computer. You look on the computer by yourself. There's also a kind of implicit assumption that everybody knows how to use the computer. This is the New World Order. So even the building that holds the computer now is closed because of C-19. Those of you who've read work from people like Naomi Klein, who talks about disaster capitalism. Whenever companies, corporations, or corporation wannabes, which is our federal, provincial, municipal government, when there's a crisis, it can be a place for a slippage to happen that takes something away from the vulnerable, the poor, the oppressed. So right now, for example, my husband died on February 19th. I was told by the funeral director that I have to take the actual one and only copy of my husband's death certificate and bring that to Service Canada. Service Canada has been closed during this whole time. The funeral person told me only the original, so I can't bring a photocopy, I can't put it through the mail, I can't take a photo of it and send it. I was told I have to show the original document to a person who will initial that they've witnessed the original document. All of this in my particular life is not a crisis or an emergency. I'm not desperate. They've already, because I did my income taxes, they've already shut down his CPP, his OAS, all that stuff. So, why do I care? Why is this a concern? Because I apparently can get some of my funeral costs reimbursed, which is $3,200. That was the cheapest for cremation that I could purchase in this town. We're very frugal people, my husband and I. Our plan is to someday get our dust to dust mixed together and thrown in our pretty little yard, and that's that. So it was a budget thing. But that $3,200, apparently, if I go to CPP or OAS or someone and show them this document, somehow some portion of that might be reimbursed to me. I'm okay. I have a paycheck every 2 weeks. I have a roof over my head. I have a fridge full of tofu. I got bags of cat food ready to go. I got toilet paper, paper towels. I got everything I need in the world. Right? But I could imagine an ordinary poor woman who wants that money back, who's desperate. That might be 3 or 4 months of rent. And meanwhile, if she goes to Service Canada, there's a little sign that says, go to this website or something. I could imagine her feeling very bereft, lost, disempowered, and just completely paralyzed by what do I do next. So, I'm going to read you something now about technology. Remember our first session I talked about getting your definitions and having books like Sociology and Encyclopedia of Canadian Social Work and so on. So technology. Here in this sociological definitions or dictionary of sociology, here's just a couple of lines. Technological determinism. The assumption that technology is both autonomous and has determinant effects on society. Technology is seen as political. This assumption is criticized for ignoring social processes and choices that guide the use of technology in the variety of possible social arrangements that coexist with different types of technology. Let that kind of play around in your mind. Technology has invaded the profession of social work in 1,000 ways in my lifetime. When I graduated with my 2-year college diploma in social work, we were at a time where all the stuff we did was actually people with people, like Wes and I, the 15, 16-year-old unemployed waitress person. Mm-hmm. Wes, by the way, every time he saw me, he said things like, "You're virtually unemployable. You should go back to school," because I had grade 8. Wes was influential in me actually going back to adult upgrading. He helped me to access a program that was sort of free tuition to go to adult upgrading and to get the equivalent of my grade 12 education while I was working. He helped me to access that because Wes was a real person who encouraged me, who saw some potentials in me and nudged me in a direction. Every time I came in, which was many times over that period from, let's say, age 15 to age 20, that 5-year period, I had a lot of part-time jobs. So waitress here, waitress there, folding clothing in a dress shop kind of jobs. So, how does all this have meaning? Right now, if you're applying for old age security, if you're applying for maybe subsidized housing, if you're applying for unemployment insurance or employment insurance, all of these different things, everything is assumed to happen on the computer. Recently, Carlene and I, if I can tell a little story, I haven't asked her permission, but so if she suddenly cuts me off and the camera shuts down, we'll know she doesn't want this talked about. Do I talk? You know where I'm going with this?
No.
Okay. Carlene promised to take me to a gardening shop.
Yeah.
On the way to the gardening shop, we get pulled over by the police. Do you want to take it from there? What happened next?
There was a slight miscommunication on the phone. I had transferred, my old debit card had been replaced. I got a new Visa, and I wanted to switch my payment method from my old card, which was going to be invalid anyways, to my Visa. I communicated this over the phone, and I guess she got like a number wrong or something because it didn't go through. So I didn't have insurance, and I was just driving without it. So that police officer thought I was just real bold and wasn't afraid. I just didn't know.
So you assumed technology had succeeded in achieving your goal, that you had insurance. The police officer informs us
That I stand corrected.
And then we had to stand for like 2.5 hours in a lineup,
After being personally escorted.
personally escorted by the police to the mall to get insurance. So, how does that relate? This relates to technology was boss in that moment. Here you are, third-year university student, very bright, very capable, very informed, very technologically savvy, and you thought you had achieved your goal. You believed you had insurance.
Yep.
A police officer on an average day quickly communicated to us that we had not achieved that goal.
Yep.
Right? So, there's a story. Here's the story of me trying to affirm my husband has died and I need this paperwork sorted out so that I can get reimbursed for some of the funeral costs. Similarly, at that same time, in this last 90 days or so, I had purchased for my husband a phone for Christmas. We wanted to shut down my husband's phone. Kudo doesn't have your husband has died, click here on this spot. Square or whatever spot. So I had to go and stand in line. It took me about 8 weeks to get organized to go stand in a line at a booth in the mall to explain to someone while I'm crying, my husband has died, I need you to shut down this phone line. There's 3 stories in our own little lives as very competent people compared to many times when you're working with social work with victims of abuse. People who are victims of abuse often, because perpetrators choose them, they're already people who are homeless, who have addictions, who are poor, who are young, who have an intellectual disability, who have some kind of challenge or cluster of challenges in front of them. They are, as a collective group, less likely to have an $800 phone. They're less likely to have a $900 portable computer. They're less likely to have all of these gifts and skills and privileges and assets that we have. Mm-hmm. Technology has consequence for the social work profession.
And at every level of it.
And every level of it. So I'm going to read you a couple more things here. Now this is from the Encyclopedia of Social Work, which is one of the ones I recommended in our first session. Buy this book. Get someone who loves you to buy this book. So here, computer competency has become a new expertise required of social workers. When I graduated with my 2-year diploma in social work, it wasn't assumed that I had a phone in my car. It wasn't assumed I had a portable computer in my car. No one assumed I had a printer at home. No one demanded that I have a computer at home. The assumption was I will do my work in my office that is provided by my employer. Just like Wes, when he worked at the unemployment insurance office, he had a desk and a chair. Mm-hmm. And I would go and visit with him at his desk and his chair. This continues here under technology. It says, increasingly social workers find themselves spending more and more time in front of a computer and less time in direct contact with clients. This trend is becoming a major concern, especially in fields such as child protection, where documentation is a significant part of the role. In my time as a social work prof here at UMBC, I've worked with many, many people who were students or peers or agency supervisors who are working in the zone of child protection and who've told me that as much as 80% of their time as social workers, 80% of their time is spent not with children. Say that to yourself a second time. You are a child protection social worker and you're spending 80% of your time not with children. The tail is wagging the dog. Our profession is becoming shaped from the outside by technology. Federal, provincial, municipal guides, funders, policymakers are deciding for us, and we resist. I want us to continue resisting. They're deciding for us what our job is. Our job, I believe, is humans to be with humans in a depthfully empathetic, attuned way. This little definition here, which is over a page, so I'm not reading you the whole thing. And information technology, as information technology continues to transform social work, ethical concerns persist on issues such as confidentiality, privacy, depersonalization, and the lack of equal access to this technology, resulting in a digital divide of technological haves and have-nots. So social work with victims of abuse, many times the people who most need support and encouragement and help are the ones who have least access to the phone, the Kudo phone line, the portable computer, the technological skills to use the computer, because it takes a certain kind of skill cluster. Here I am with a PhD and 23 years in academia, and I hardly know what the hell is going on half the time in regards to technology. I'm fortunate enough that I can pay people out of my own pocket to help me cope. Not every person can afford to do that. I want to talk to you about something else. Yesterday we talked about organizational dynamics. The organization will never love you. The organization has its own priorities, rhythms, dynamics, and often the organization is coming at us as social workers. The organization is coming at us with an MBA worldview, an economics worldview, versus a human entitlement, a human empathy, a tenderness, an attunement. It's coming with, we could decrease the budget by 10% by doing this and this and this and this with technology. Perhaps it does, but perhaps it actually doesn't in the long run. Here, this book, The Shadow and the Counselor, Working with the Darker Aspects of the Person, Role, and Profession by Steve Page. I adore this book. My understanding is it's no longer in print. I used to use this in this course. It's got a chapter about the shadow of the profession, the collective shadow. A collective may be any group of people, a whole nation, a race, a religion, a corporation, an educational community, or a small clique. And it gives the example of the Roman Catholic Church. It gives some other examples. There are also examples of groups committed to stopping violence being perpetrated upon the vulnerable who are themselves violent in their protests. This can be seen, for example, when animal rights activists threaten lives and start to damage property. So, you have the whole group of animal rights activists, and every once in a while you hear these stories where animal rights activists blew up a building or something, and you think...
There was a whole Netflix series called Don't Fuck with Cats. Don't know if I'm going to say that.
She said don't fuck with cats! I'm okay with that!
And it was about how there was an online search for a person that was committing these crimes and killing cats. But there were animal rights activists that were threatening to kill people that weren't actually committing the crimes because they thought that they had found the guy.
Right, so we have to be really careful of where we go on the ethical edge. Get to where is the edge. So technology, if you take this belief here that we all have a shadow as individuals, we have a dark side, and we all have a shadow as an organization or as a collective group, as a profession. I would suggest that some social workers who might be getting burnt out, who are getting overwhelmed, who are getting discouraged, they might be kind of on a subconscious level keen to go to technology, because then I never have to actually be with my clients in the room. I only have to see them on the website when I'm ready to see them. Puts us 100% in control if your clients are all on the web, doesn't it? I can decide when I'm going to press click. I can decide, versus Wes, who used to actually go to a real building, a real office, and sit in his real room where I could see him. He was right there. There's Wes. I could see him while I was waiting and pulling the cards off the wall, and he could see me. And he knew I could just walk up to him. Mm-hmm. It creates a different kind of, let's say, potential intimacy, eye contact. I can smell your body. I can hear your voice in an authentic way, versus through technology sometimes you don't hear it the same way.
Yeah.
Right? The way you're hearing me now. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So, in this book, he's talking about the essential process of collective shadow formation corresponds to that which occurs in the personal shadow. As the collective takes on an identity or ego, so a shadow forms and takes shape. When the collective determines, as part of its identity, to emphasize a particular characteristic, the opposing aspect may be driven into unconsciousness. So unconsciously, some social workers could be at a place right now where they're like, I'm so overwhelmed, and clients yell at me, and clients feel angry and frustrated because they've had to wait a long time, or they're not getting proper services because of budget cutbacks, austerity, downsizing, all of these different forces in the world. Some social workers could be, let's say, unnaturally keen on moving to technology, because it does make us feel safer. If I'm in a protected office and clients aren't even allowed on that floor. I worked in a building once where, when I was working for workers' compensation, clients were not even allowed on that floor of the building. There were secure locks and you had to use your card like a CIA or FBI person. And this is a long time ago. So the clients weren't even allowed on that floor, and they could only engage with us by phone when we phoned them. Right? So who is the boss? Who's in control? I'm in control. The clients are maybe mad because they got injured at work and they're in a lot of pain and they need support and money and help and guidance, and they need access to a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a surgery, right? Mm-hmm. But who's in control? I'm in control if they can't even ever speak to me in person. I'm boss, right? So why am I telling you this all today? Because I think more and more we need to be vigilant, we need to be cautious, we need to put up barriers and resist. We may not always succeed, as for example today, I am not succeeding. I would have liked to have taught this course in person in Quesnel as was originally designed. But we're moving to technology. There's going to be maybe 20 little videos that'll be on YouTube. The good news of that is, yeah, all kinds of people can watch those. Apparently 65 people have watched our first video. It's only been out for a week. Not even a week. You put it up on Friday and today's Tuesday. And it's free. So anybody can watch it. So that's wonderful. That aspect is wonderful. But the 18 or 25 people that have paid for this course that I want to work with and teach with and learn with, there are limits to what I'm going to say on video. There are limits to what students are going to truthfully say back with me. When I teach this course in person, people have disclosed about how they were incested, or they were beaten up, or their mother was raped, or their cousin was beaten up because of homophobia or racism. People may not tell that depthful level through video because maybe one of the 65 random strangers who watches that is someone they don't feel safe with, versus when I teach this in person, right? So I want us to reflect today on, yeah, there are advantages to moving with technology. There are also disadvantages, and we have to reflect on that around confidentiality, platonic intimacy, about authenticity, about safety. There's a whole bunch of stuff. The other thing I want to talk about is the containment of space. When we apply for things in person, when I would talk to Wes, we could talk until we decided we didn't want to talk anymore. Of course, there were limits. I wasn't going to go spend the whole day with Wes talking about unemployment, and he wasn't going to spend the whole day talking to one person, obviously. Professional limits, right? But every now and then, when we're working with a client, we know we have this 1 hour schedule, but we know some clients sometimes are in absolute crisis, and we let that stretch a little bit. Some of the clients that, when I worked in the social assault treatment program for 3 years, one of the things I would do is I would try and always see new clients at the end of the day. So, let's say my usual schedule was 4 o'clock, let's say. I would ask the new client to come at 3, Because then if it did work to be 4:30, if she's crying and very, very distressed and kind of chaotic, we could go until we concluded this, until our engagement and the disclosure kind of found its sense of wholeness. Much of the time now, when we're working with technology, technology simply shuts us out and shuts us off. That is not done by accident. That is done with an intention. I taught a course on the web. It was designed by someone else, but it was called Social Work Ethics. There were modules that would happen 1 week at a time. So the students could go into this space, respond to material, and if they hadn't responded within 7 days, they lost their chance to do that. I don't know if all courses are like that, but there are many things. Another example, when you apply for certain programs, resources, grants, scholarships, bursaries, you're allowed so many characters to fill in, and then you get to the end of the, what would you call that, block or space, or, do you know what I mean? What's the, Steven Spielberg, what's that called?
Which one?
When there's only so much space, it allows you to give 17 characters or 2 lines, or when you fill in
like the search field or the blank field.
Okay, in the old days, I'll call those the West days. West.
You mean columns? Small, then you're gonna write it?
Right, that there's a square when
columns.
Quotas.
Columns.
Columns are I like the word quota too, that there's a certain amount, right? That you want to keep typing. It asks you a question and you want to keep typing, but then it doesn't.
There's a limit on it.
There's a limit on it. What happens to human meaning when there's a limit on it? Kind of like the kudo thing where I wanted to tell them, my husband has died, it was a Christmas present, I need to shut it down. There was nowhere in any of these things I clicked on that option. They excluded that option because they didn't want their time to be wasted. They had put together a template, a formula, a sequence of options, and that's it. So going back to social work with victims of abuse, if you have a client who's homeless, let's say, a very common story. A young man, young woman are living together. She has left home to go live with him. They think they're in love. 2 months later, he's beating her up. She runs in the middle of the night to get away from him. She runs to stay at her friend's house. Her friend says, you can only stay here for 1 day because I live in a tiny little dump. And that's it. Right? So, that's a very common story. In the best world, and still the world that we have now, she can go to a women's shelter, knock on the door, be let in, and be given a bed to sleep on, be given some food. We have 5 shelters that provide that service in this community. Let's imagine a terrible future world where she would first have to fill in some kind of thing on a computer. It's the middle of the night. Where is she going to get a computer? Where is she going to go? Maybe her friend doesn't have a computer. Picture this. If you have been anally raped, press 1. If you've been vaginally raped, press 2. If you've been orally raped, press 3. If you've been vaginally and orally raped, press 4. This is gruesome and hideous.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a grotesque imagining of a potential future if technology becomes the boss in too many circumstances. We want to limit it. Right now, I've been told, put all your courses on the web. I've been given what some people will think is support. When I've said, support me, help me, I need help. I've been sent a website. I've been sent collective presentations that have on some kind of website. That's not actually helping me. Maybe they believe they're helping me, but they're not helping me. Similarly, some social workers could say, well, she has a website to go to. She has a form she can fill in. All she has to do is press the right digits. No. The one thing that social work might be able to claim that's different than most other professions is human uniqueness. Every client in front of me is abused differently. No pattern. There are general patterns, but no client fulfills exact patterns. Right? Every person's story needs that human touch of empathy, compassion, attunement, tenderness, sequencing, pacing, inviting the client to tell their story as they organically wish to share that story's unfolding. A monster future world would be, you have 5 minutes to disclose your abuse. Ding! At 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes to now discuss your legal requests. Bing!
Press pound if you need more time.
Press pound, right? So technology right now, in terms of social work with victims of abuse, what do I wish you to get? I wish you to get the idea that we want to resist, we want to be cautious, we want to be mindful. We have a gift, a skill, an area of gold that clients need, that the community needs, and part of that is our ability to be unique with every single person. There is no template. There are some general patterns. If you're a social worker in a women's shelter, a social worker in a group home for youth, a social worker in a jail, a social worker in a hospital, a social worker like Wes helping with unemployed people. All of these different spaces, there are some constrictions, we accept that. There are some boundaries, there are some limits, and there are patterns. But R2D2 is not the answer. A computer is not the answer. The answer is that we remain boss about when and where we might use technology, and also that we remain boss about first human contact, and then maybe together with the client we help them apply for their unemployment insurance or their old age security or their disability insurance or subsidized housing. That an actual human is where we start. I think it's somewhat of a criminal neglect that right now Service Canada remains closed. My belief is it's been about 80 days, 90 days that it's been closed. That's a very, very long time to abandon your clients. I understand workers have rights. Workers want to be protected. We've got our masks, we've got our social distancing, we could have our gloves, we've got our Lysol, we've got limits of how many people we might see in a day. All of that, fair enough, very respectful and empathetic. But that should only have taken about 5 days to put into place. It shouldn't take 3 months. What I see here is someone has used a wiggle space, like Naomi Klein has said, that be cautious when there's a crisis, that something can get slipped in there in the solution to the crisis. And the solution here is not keeping the government services office closed for 8 months, 10 months. How long? Right? And it isn't necessarily a solution in child protection work that 80% of your time is spent not with children. So we want to be cautious about that. And we also want to say back to all our organizations, if you want to shift us to some aspects of technology, you have to provide the resources and the specialists to do that work. Social work is absolutely a dog's barf breakfast of everything. Social work, when we talked about interdisciplinarity and intersectionality, social work is one of those professions where I need to know a lot about humans. The whole life cycle, everything that I can about humans, and helping them in good, compassionate, empathetic, skilled ways. I also need to know about the medical profession, for example. I need to know when a client tells me they're addicted to opioids. I need to have a sense if that's my area. I need to know what that means. If a client has Alzheimer's and is taking 10 medications, I need to reflect on how those medications have meaning. So I have to have a medical and a pharmaceutical knowledge. I need to understand the law. If you're taking your clients to court because in issues of divorce or issues of violence or issues of child protection, you need to understand the law. So social work, human development, medical, pharmaceutical, the law. I need to understand policy as a social worker. So I need to understand history. I need to understand economics, all of that stuff. Federal, provincial, municipal government. Who's going to pay for this? What am I advocating for? I need to understand the media. If I'm doing protests or rallies, or I want to be an executive director of an organization and help the community understand these issues, I need to understand how to do a media release, how to speak on the 6 o'clock news, how to speak on a podium or a protest rally, microphone. I need to understand how to use the media for my causes and my issues. I need to understand nutrition. I need to understand human movement. If I'm working with disabled people who are in wheelchairs who've had a stroke, I need to understand physiology. I need to understand how to help them with their exercise routine so that they don't lose more muscle power and so that they can even expand and heal their muscle power. Right? All of these different areas of social work, it grows, it grows, it grows. And now being told, well, you need to understand technology, you need to design your courses, you need to understand Blackboard, you need to understand Zoom, you need to understand, what are some of the other things that have happened in the last 80 days or so?
Blue jeans.
Blue jeans. I need to understand how to create technological rubrics for automatic marking. I need to understand all these things because I'm a social worker and I care.
How to create a YouTube channel.
How
How to
to
upload a YouTube video.
All of these things. This is just part of who I am as a social worker. Whoa. Whoa. You are expanding my job description by miles and miles and miles off the corner of my desk. It's because they're off the corner of my continent, off the corner of my nation. Whoa, 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 right?
This is how we know flat Earth isn't a thing.
Yeah, so social work is one of the most, it's a web. All the knowledge we're constantly bringing into our world. We were talking earlier about HIV, and then that's another example. When I graduated from my 2-year diploma and then my BSW, my master's, my PhD, all that stuff, no one at that time was really talking about HIV. It's a whole other body of knowledge that we've had to, depending where you're located, you've had to come to understand and learn. And AIDS, and what is that all about? And then, now we're knowing, or we should be knowing, that many of our clients can have had HIV, been HIV positive for 25 years. And they're on a whole array of medications. So when it first was out as an issue and a concern similar to right now, C-19, there were certain prejudices and beliefs and stigmas, and we were hitting the ground running. And now we are understanding the issues now are becoming, organ failure after 25 years of taking medications. That's a whole other thing, right? Constant knowledge, constant knowledge. It keeps us on alert. It's good. You can't get bored in this profession because there's always something new to learn. But at the same time, it's part of what we need. It's a dragon on the edge of our day-to-day. What is technology demanding of us? What is it demanding of clients? Where are we being abandoned? Where are we abandoning our excellence? Where are clients being abandoned and left on their own? So this is my little rant for today on technology. Thank you again, Tuba, Carlene, and all the people who've signed up, and the 65 mystery people who watched the video. And thank you.